All right, everybody, welcome to Unscripted One-on-One. Man, I'm excited. Y'all have probably seen this on my social media. If you've followed me for any period of time, you probably know that I'm kind of excited. So before we get started, let me bring everybody kind of up to speed on my guest. Okay, so let's go back to let me reverse the tape here to gosh, 2009, 2010. And Pete, you can probably verify when this was. My wife and I were stupid enough to run the Nashville half marathon, which a lot of people have heard that story before, but we were dumb enough to run that half marathon, and it was a disaster. And about a week later, there was several connections that I have made that people have heard about through this podcast during that half marathon. And so on social media, I'm watching the floods. Pete, was that 2009?
That was 2010.
2010. Okay. 2010. So 2010, I'm watching the floods literally in real time on social media, which was one of those moments where I think it was one of the first events that I ever watched unfold on social media from Ohio. And so I'm watching this unfold. And what I watched was a church called Cross Point Church that suddenly evolved as the hub for relief efforts. And again, from Ohio, I watched and I said, man, that's really amazing. First of all, what I've always said and what I've always believed is, and at that point I knew something's different here. For a church to be able to be positioned to be the hub for all of the relief efforts in a city means that church has done their homework. That church has earned the right to be there. They couldn't just show up overnight, because the Red Cross shows up overnight, Samaritan's Purse, there's a lot of places that show up overnight, but nobody knows who they are. For a church to say, we're here, what do we need to do, and then to be the hub. So that's dot number one. Dot number two is I fell in love with Cross Point Church in that process, the fact that they had earned that right. So then let's fast forward a little bit further. I get let go from corporate America in a riff. That happens. I got 6 months severance to figure out what I do when I grow up. and for me, what I wanted to do when I grew up was I said, you know what, I want to be a part of that church. And it just so happens that church had posted a few positions. So I go through the process of interviewing for the multi-church pastor position with Jenny Catron, who's going to be on Friday, and I can't wait because I love her dearly.
She's amazing.
She's amazing. So I interview with Jenny, and I meet you, and I meet our staff, and I get to know your staff. And what's funny is your staff has become friends to me over the years, really, really close. And I've gotten to know many of them over the years. We're a phone call away from coming to work for Cross Point Church. We're ready to move our family. And you know what? God had other plans. And the day that it happened, didn't happen. And again, this is a long story, but please stay with me on this because I do want to get to Pete here in a minute. But you all went a different direction. And we all know now looking back that that's probably the best bet. So it doesn't happen. That day it didn't happen. I hang up the phone. I look at my wife and I said, what are we going to do now? Because we thought we were going to Nashville. And we go out to the flyer. There's a flyer in the mail for a new church that's just starting in Columbus that looks exactly like Cross Point. Fast forward a little bit. I ended up working for that church for about 8 months, had a cup of coffee in ministry, which we'll talk about in a minute, and realized a lot of things in my life personally. But that season ends and we're a little bit scrambling as a family. Like, what do we do now? And so all through that time, Cross Point is online and you're preaching on Sundays, and you became the church that we went to on Sunday mornings in Columbus online. And it was just amazing. So I have a lot of connecting points with Cross Point. I also have some books, and I'm going to put them up. Anybody that's watching, so there's Plan B and Empty Promises and Let Hope In. So I got 3 books that a certain pastor wrote that I've held very, very near. And actually, before we get off, there's 2 quotes in here I want to go back to. So all that. That was a really long introduction. Let me introduce my guest. Let my guest introduce himself. Welcome to Unscripted. Please introduce yourself, Pete Wilson.
I'm so glad to be here. My name is Pete Wilson, and yes, I used to pastor Cross Point Church, and it's so cool to just hear how our paths crossed. And I remember, I couldn't tell you the year, but I remember, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think there was a Sunday that you came and visited. You guys drove down. I remember chatting with you in the lobby, and yeah, man. I tell you, I have so many incredible memories going all the way back. And when you interviewed Jenny, you can confirm this with her and ask her about 2010 floods, because she was the executive pastor. And I think Jenny's one of the most phenomenal leaders I've ever had the privilege to work with. And I noticed I didn't say female leaders, just flat out leader. She is one of the best leaders I've ever worked with. Wow, that was a crazy season for us. And we really didn't know what we were doing, to be honest with you. There was a pastor by the name of Dino Rizzo. I don't know if you've heard of Dino or not. He's with the Ark, and he had called me the night all the floods were happening. And he said, "What are you guys doing in response?" And I was like, to be honest, Dino, I don't know. I don't know anything about like flood relief. And he said, "It doesn't matter, Pete. You guys just need to step out and say you're doing something. And what you're going to see is God's faithfulness, and resources will show up and people will get behind you, but you got to lead." And this goes back to the power. It's the first time I ever saw the power of social media in this way. But I just tweeted that Sunday night, the floods were happening all day Sunday. I said, "Hey, tomorrow afternoon at, I can't remember what time, 3:00, anybody who wants to show up to help start serving, show up." And like 1,000+ people showed up, and we were like, what are we going to do now? But I often think back to Dino Rizzo and him pushing me and just saying, lead, step out. Doesn't matter if you don't know what you're doing, just jump out there and do something. So I learned a lot through that.
Yeah, and that's what I watched. So I watched that from Ohio. Was I see you tweet that, and then I see pictures of people showing up with boats and stuff, and it was just like, again, I'll never forget it, because I said that's a church, whether it's in Columbus or in Nashville, that's a church I want to be a part of, is one that has earned the right to be that point person, because that's the church. There's no red tape. There's no government this. We don't have to ask for that. You just get to go do stuff. And that, not to quote Bob Goff, our friend Bob Goff, but just go do stuff, man. Just love people. And that was it. And it was impressive to me. So, all right. So let's fast forward. Where the heck are you now? Because I think a lot of us, I saw some other people on social media say, hey, I can't wait. And they're excited, and people want to see, what is Pete Wilson up to now?
Yeah, great question. Up to all kinds of things, to be honest with you. And there's obviously, we can go back if you want. We can talk about, what I've been doing the past 4 years, but a lot of personal healing, a lot of personal growth during this time. I needed to step away from ministry for a season. A lot of years of just, giving and going and doing. And I needed to step back, and there's some much needed personal growth that needed to happen in my life. And so I'm grateful. I mean, I'm not saying I've arrived, because there's plenty of more personal growth that needs to happen, but I'm in a much better place than I was over 4 years ago now, when I stepped down from Cross Point in complete burnout and in a true spiral, I would say, in my personal life and in ministry in general. But so for years I kind of did some consulting stuff. I did some marketing stuff. It was fun. But again, for me, my main job during all that time was just healing and growing and trying to figure out, who am I outside of ministry? My identity had become so married to being a pastor that once I was no longer a pastor, I really didn't even know who I was. And so there's a lot of work that had to take place there. But about a year ago, I started serving at a church up in Plymouth, Michigan, called Northridge Church. And I get to be their teaching pastor there. So I still live in Nashville, but I fly up there fairly often to teach there, and also kind of lead out their ministries team. it's the first time in my adult life that I've served in a church and not been the senior pastor. I started 2 churches. My first one was when I was a senior in college. So that's kind of all I'd ever done. And I'm learning so much just being able to serve under somebody else's leadership. It's been
Yeah.
so good for me. I
Yeah.
love it. I love not having the mantle and the pressure of being that senior pastor. I love support. That the senior pastor I serve under, Brad Powell, is an amazing guy, and he's been so good to me and just really helped me find joy again in ministry and help find restoration for me. He never gave up on me. He's been a friend of mine for years. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to serve under his leadership. And it's been really good for me. So I'm loving that.
That's awesome. And you have a pretty cool podcast, I mean, I had to do my homework because it's been a minute since we connected in that lobby. And
Yeah.
then also, there's one other thing that we glossed over that I gotta mention. Not that I'm bragging on myself, but man, I was in that season. I left ministry myself, and I have a 3-legged stool analogy when it comes to ministry. And I don't know if we want to go through it on here, but I do believe that going into ministry is tough because there's your family, there's your job, and there's your faith.
Mm.
And when you go into ministry, I believe that 2 of those legs become one, and that's your job and your faith. And man, anyway, that's a whole nother rant for another podcast. But I found myself in a season of much like you said, I needed healing. I had to find and figure out what just happened, because I went from corporate America to working in the church to being out now, and who am I,
Right.
And I think that was
Right.
tough. And so I drove 6 hours to a worship night because I saw Crosspoint was having a worship night. And again, that was Crosspoint for me was some kind of North Star that you know what I mean? It's weird. I don't know, man. There will forever be a special relationship with me and Nashville and Crosspoint and you. And again, we don't hang out on the weekends, but I've always felt this deep connection to all those. And so I got in my car and I drove 6 hours because I figured nothing better than windshield time and me and God. And I got to figure this out. Like, we got to wrestle a little bit, right? And then I went down and had worship night, and then got in my car and drove home. I got home about 3 a.m, back to Columbus. But that worship time for me was that whole 12 hours, and then that worship time in between, and then some time with some of your staff when I arrived was special. And so all that to say, you started a new podcast. And it's pretty awesome. And so that was completely unrelated, but that's welcome to Unscripted. So,
yeah, there you go. I love it. I love the idea of Unscripted. You sound a lot like I do. I've got all these different ideas and thoughts, and sometimes I'll transition to one and I'm like, how did I get here again? Yeah, we started a new podcast with my wife. It's called the Good Talk Podcast. And we're just like, I think 6 weeks into it. So we're not a seasoned expert like you by any means, but we're having fun. We're having a blast with it. And we wanted to do, she kind of has her own, ministry stuff and job stuff. And I kind of have my thing. We're like, let's do something where we can like serve together.
Mm-hmm.
And so this has been really fun to kind of launch this and just do this together. And honestly, it came from, we just live in this great neighborhood here in Franklin, Tennessee. We've made some awesome friends, and the vast majority of them are not connected to a church at all. Of course, now, like, how could they be? But
right.
They weren't even before that. And yet they're very interested in spiritual things. And it's like we wanted to start having a conversation together that we would put out there via the podcast, world, that could engage them kind of where they're at. And so that's really our goal with this. And it's been a lot of fun just the past few weeks to be a part of it.
You guys are doing awesome. I love it. I'm a fan. And so where can people find that before I go on another rant? Where can you find that?
Yeah, I think my understanding of all of this is that you can just find it wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. So whether it's Spotify or iTunes or, any of those things, it's the Good Talk with Pete and Jordan Wilson. Shouldn't be too hard to find in there. So yeah.
The Lessons from the Farm episodes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Let me go ahead and recommend those, because you said one that, and I was actually out on a walk with my wife the other day, and we talked a little bit about it, because you talked about how, well, I thought it was hilarious when you talked about the dial-up and the zero on the
Yeah,
phone.
yeah.
Right, that was pretty funny. But also the fact that we pull in our garage, and I have a house for my car, and so anybody listening to this, please go find that podcast. Please hear that episode. I don't remember if it's episode 1 or episode 2 of Lessons from the Farm, but great stuff about the fact that what did you say? Because I tweeted it and I can't remember now. I don't have my phone near me. What did you say? We can't appreciate what we're
Yeah,
entitled to. What did you
I
say?
think it was, you can't be grateful for something you feel entitled to.
There you go.
And that's a big lesson for me. There's so much that I feel entitled to, and
Right.
again, that higher your sense of entitlement, the lower your sense of gratitude in life. And I'm pretty sure I talked about that in the podcast, so I'll just mention it here. Is I started a gratitude journal. So every morning it's the very first thing I do is kind of jotting down the things I'm grateful for. I'm blown away with how it's changed my attitude and my perspective throughout my day. It
Right.
really has. And I don't know how long I'll do it, but in this season, it's been so helpful to me. And so someone that's struggling with perspective and attitude, that might be a good place to start, is just jotting down those things that you're grateful for.
It's awesome. So, all right, let me go to my torn and tattered, worn out, underlined copy of Plan B by Pete Wilson. So that 3 books, right? Do you have any more than that? Do you have more than 3 books?
Yeah, I do have a 4th one. I'm trying to remember what it is right now.
That's awesome.
You
We got
you
Plan
had Let
B,
Hope In, Plan
Empty
B,
Promises,
Empty
Let Hope In.
Promises.
And I have a Let Hope In T-shirt. Doesn't fit anymore because COVID happened, and I
There's
need to
another one. I don't have many of my books up in my own house, so I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Plan B though.
Let's go to Plan B.
Is my favorite to be. It was my first book. It's still my favorite book. I'll be honest though and say I wish I could rewrite it. There needs to be like a Plan B 2.0.
Plan B.
But when you write a book with the subtitle, what do you do when God doesn't show up for you in the way that you thought God was going to show up?
Right.
But you write that before you go through burnout, before you go through depression, before you go through a divorce, before you lose basically everything that you thought was important to you. You'd like to have another shot at rewriting that book, And I don't think I'd change a whole lot in it, but I think to the reader it would feel completely different, because they'd be like, oh, okay. The truths of the book are still the same.
Yeah.
But when I wrote that book, I had to tap into everybody else's story. I mean, to be honest, the first 40 years of my life, everything was up and to the right. Everything, like everything I touched, for some reason, it seemed to be blessed. It turned to gold, whatever you want to, terminology you want to use. So I had to tap into other people's stories of hurt and loss. I didn't really have too much of my own story at that time. So man, I could go back and there'd be some things I would probably write different, but I don't want to take away from you. You had a couple things in the book.
No. So do you feel like Plan B cursed you?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It helped me. I think that things, again, I stand by the things that are in the book. The truths in that book are still the same. I think I ended that whole book by talking about, you can't always put a pretty bow on it. There's some things in life that are ugly and hurt. And I always think there's a purpose to the pain. But you can't always put a pretty bow on it. And, not all the stories. And I think this is a temptation. I see this all the time. We fell into this temptation when I was at Cross Point. We love to tell the stories that have the nice, pretty bow at the end.
Right.
We're never afraid of telling somebody's, story, as long as we're able to tie the redemption story at the end of, oh, this is how it all worked out. And, so-and-so got saved and this good came out of this bad. But we're often afraid of telling the stories that are still in transition. Mm-hmm. And the reality is we're all in transition. We are. We're all in different chapters. And so I just think that when you get down to just real life and difficult things, and that's what that book was really all about. What do you do when you find yourself in a situation where life isn't turning out the way you thought life was going to turn out?
Right.
How do you respond in those situations? That's what the book was about. So no, I don't think it cursed me. I think I was glad to be able to, at certain seasons, lean on some of those different truths that I knew that they worked. I knew that it was truth. And I may have avoided it. I may have run from it in certain seasons, but there was certainly a time in my life where I had to lean on those things. And I had to lean on the only thing that wasn't changing in my life, which was Jesus. So very helpful.
And that's awesome. And that was unfortunately a left field question. I hit you with you thought you were sitting fastball, I threw you a curveball. So
no, that's good.
One of the things about Unscripted and an underwritten rule is that if there's ever a question I ask you and you don't want to or can't or any of those things, you just say pass, and my entire audience understands that no. So,
okay.
But
okay.
That being said, I think, man, I get that. I really appreciate what you said, because I do think that we want this. I think that's where so many people struggle with their faith. For those of us that, there's that immediate moment, right, where someone comes to faith, and I think there's almost an expectation where the rest of my life is going to be unicorns and bears dipped in honey, and it's not. Right? I mean, it's not. And I think we're going to struggle. And I think for those of us that are veterans of faith, I think we almost are drawn towards stories of people that still are in that struggle, because we understand that struggle. I think anyone that, and man, now I'm on my own podcast and I can say these things, but I think anybody that says that everything's just awesome is I'm not sure you've experienced yet what really faith is about, because we really got to grind. And I think there's times it's almost like an athlete, right? You can be a LeBron James, but there's a lot of steps to where LeBron James is. And I think we see that in our faith. There's a lot of, we got to grind. And there's times when it's not going to be the All-Star game, and you're not going to be the $98 million contract from Nike. You're going to be in a place where people are going to hate you because you went to Miami.
Yep, that's right.
Weird analogy right now, but I think that's
right.
I think that's our faith, right? I think. So let me ask you this. So two quotes. The first one says, "I will abandon my dream, but not my God." Mm-hmm. And this is, I opened this randomly today and looked at my underlines in this book. Man, that one hit different, Pete. I will abandon my dreams, but not my God. Like, if there was ever a 2020 verse, maybe that's it, right? Like, kids are losing their seasons. People are losing their job. We're losing a lot in 2020. Our dreams. I think isn't that fair to say? And so I'm going to my internet pastor now, who's Pete Wilson. I think, isn't that fair to say that's where we're at in 2020? I'll abandon my dreams, but not my God. I won't lose everything in this. I'm going to lose a lot in this pandemic. I'm not going to lose my God. Is that fair?
I think it's very fair, and I think it's true. And I think in that particular quote was tied to a story about Joseph out of the Old Testament, and he went through season after season where things were completely stacked against him. Things he didn't deserve that happened. He was wrongfully accused and thrown into prison. Through all of that, I think it would have been easy for him to say, God, are you kidding me? After everything I've done for you, I've been faithful. I've checked off this box, that box. And, and all these things are going to continue to stack up against me. I think it would have been easy for him to, abandon God and keep chasing after his dreams, but he didn't. And he kept his priority God. And dreams are great. I love dreams. I love goals. I love chasing after them. Dreams make lousy gods. They just do. Dreams come and go. Dreams will disappoint you all day long. But the one thing that will stay constant through it all is God. And so that's always tried to be a perspective for me is chase after God first, chase after the dream second. And yeah, you're right. In 2020, gosh, yeah, so many dreams are being dashed right now. So if your hope and faith were completely wrapped around one of your dreams or one of your goals, it's quite likely that your faith is just a pile right now, because that's where it was, resting on. I was trying to rest on that foundation, and that foundation this year has proven to be not worth a lot. I mean, it fell apart for most of us. So yeah, that's a great quote. I hadn't thought about that quote in a long time, but it fits so well with what's going on in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. And same chapter, I think maybe the next page over, or 2 pages over. Let me read you one more. When life doesn't turn out the way you thought it was going to turn out, you may think that you're losing control, but the truth is you never had control in the first place.
Mm.
The only thing you can control is how you respond to your disappointments and how your unexpected obstacles. And here, and here you have some options. And then you go into some options. So, and that's, anybody wants to pick up plan B and read the rest. It's a teaser, but I think that's, again, 2 different pages I flipped to. Those 2 underlines hit different in 2020, right? That's where we're at. Like, wouldn't you agree?
I would. And that quote, that's a hard one to hear back, because again, it's, when I wrote it, I meant that. It's true. Like, the illusion of control is so powerful in your life, and it's addictive. Control is addictive.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look back and I think about some of my demise in ministry in that particular season when I was at Crosspoint, it probably wrapped around that. I think it's hard to not, when you're leading a large organization that's growing fast and you're making decisions and all the decisions seem to be going right and they're working out, and all the ideas you come up with, like, you throw them out there, boom, all these people show up to it, and it's this success and that success. Man, success breeds the illusion of control. It just does. Right? It's only through failure that most often we're humbled and we begin to realize that we really didn't deserve, so many of the different things that happen. So for me, even though I knew that as a truth, I still fell prey to that addiction of control, of thinking that I had control. It was on the other side of me, stepping away from Crosspoint, on the other side of divorce, is on the other side of all that I realized actually I couldn't control all these different little aspects of my life.
Right.
It brought a humility, it brought a surrender that I didn't willingly walk into. Right, this wasn't a surrender like, oh, here, have this. This felt forced upon me through embarrassment, through public failure. It was definitely forced upon me, but it was through that, and that's probably the only way that I could have been broken and realized that whole illusion of control that I had bought into.
Well, it was so funny when I opened that, because I think that's I have 2 young girls in her high school, one that's in college, a son that's in college, all athletes, all kids that are used to playing or competing or doing well in school or seeing their friends. And man, if that's not the truth of 2020, is that we have finally, and I've said that to my wife as well many times, she's the one that has the calendar on the refrigerator that's got everything, in pencil in different colors for every different kid. And the reality is we have zero control. Like we've lost control in 2020, not on our own doing. It's been stripped from us. And if there's one thing we can take away from 2020, it's the fact that we don't have control. And that, if we can, that's why I love that quote. And again, I only flipped open to 2 pages, but I'm telling you, Pete, all 3 of these books are wore out from me, from reading and underlining. And again, just that connecting point for you and I. But, man, when I saw that, I'm like, wow, if that's not true this year, I don't know what year it would be true.
Yeah.
Is we don't have control. And the reality is that our control lies somewhere else.
That's
and,
right.
And we're going to lose, our poor kids have lost so much this year. So much has been canceled, taken away, and every day it's another thing. And I worry about our next. So let me ask you this, as my internet pastor,
Okay.
what do you tell this generation of kid, that honestly, Pete, I'm worried about the mental health and wellness of our kids. COVID's what it is, and we can all worry. And I'm not diminishing COVID, because if anybody's lost someone from COVID, I truly am sorry. Like, I hate this pandemic. But what I worry about for our kids is their mental wellness. What do you tell our kids?
Yeah. I think it's a very real struggle. I have 3 teenagers. He, for the last 6 years of his life, his only dream has been to play college football. And to be honest, like, us, the Wilson family, we're not the largest people in the world. So I thought his dream was crazy. I really did. And he flat out worked his tail off through middle school, through all of high school. Every workout they offered him, he was there. Bonus workouts, he was like, it's all he's wanted for.
Right.
He gets to go, gets accepted at Birmingham Southern to play football, and boom, pandemic hits.
Right.
And everything he's worked for, they had no season this year. It's that was his life.
Right.
And that's just, again, that's a small microcosm of what's happened for lots of kids all over the place, whether it's sports or whatever. So I think it is an extremely difficult time. And what I try to help my kids focus on right now is don't get so lasered in on what has been taken away from you.
Right.
Let's try to get focused on what opportunities this is providing for you. And so let's just use my oldest son, Jet, with football. It's a chance for you to get bigger, right? To eat more, work out more. You're going to get an extra year if you want an extra year.
Yeah.
You probably weren't going to play a lot as a freshman anyway.
Right.
So, and I know it's not easy to do, and it certainly doesn't fix it or take everything away. But I've had to do that in my own personal life, is say, okay, let's focus on what we're gaining during this season. Let's focus on, what are the good things that are coming out of this? Because it's so easy to focus on all the stuff that's not happening, all the stuff that's being canceled, all the stuff that's being taken away.
Right.
And so that's kind of been my little perspective shift during this season.
Yeah. Well, and I knew my internet pastor would have the answer for me. So,
well, again, there's probably some much better answers out there, but that's mine.
No, I think it's a good one. So let me ask you one thing, and I know we're running short on time, and y'all don't know how much I appreciate Pete Wilson being on with me today. We have several connecting points that none of them are deep connections. So it's not like I've been at your house or for 4th of July, which you never invited me to 4th of July. And I'm not mad. I'm also not mad that you didn't hire me. Let's identify the, and I'll tell Jenny that on Friday. Like,
yeah.
Come on. But no,
Can I blame it on her? Would I be throwing her under the bus? I could say, no, I wanted Aaron and she didn't. And no, I honestly do not remember all the details of it, but
right. And honestly, it's all good. God works in mysterious ways, and we're where we are for a reason. And honestly, when I look, when you look back at things, it all makes sense. So, but that running out, tell me about Dream Year. What's happening with Dream Year?
Yep. So this is something new that I'm really excited about. Like, I just kept hearing so many people talking about, can't wait for 2020 to be done. Like, let's be done with this year, And I just, I listen to people and hear people say that, but I'd start to think, do you really think there's going to be a whole lot different about 2021? Right. I mean, like, other than the calendar turning the page, like, if you haven't changed some things about how you're approaching the year, then, COVID has had a massive impact on all of us, but it also gets blamed for a lot of things that have nothing to do with COVID.
Right.
And so I just started thinking, everybody's anticipating next year, but a lot of people aren't changing the way they're approaching the year. And I think the biggest thing that will make 2021 different than 2020 is how people approach their dreams and the goals that they have for next year.
Yeah.
And so I know for me, almost every dream and every goal that I've ever achieved in my life has been because there was a team of people who came around me, who encouraged me, who held me accountable. I say this all the time, but God has always used community to confront my desire to give up, always.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I want to create this thing called Dream Year. I'm going to invite like 20 people to be a part of it. And it's going to be a mixture of some monthly teachings that'll help people get through a lot of the things that often keep them from reaching their goals and their dreams. But it's also going to be a monthly live coaching call that we're going to do together as a group, a private Facebook page. It's all designed around helping people achieve whatever goals and dreams they want to next year. So I'm really excited about that. And I've spent a lot of time in the last 3 months kind of designing this course and thinking through what this was going to look like. And so I'm pretty pumped about it. Anybody that's interested, by the way, you can go to theplaceforgood.com, theplaceforgood.com. And that's where you can get more information about it. But Yeah, it's going to be kind of a small group of people, but I think it's going to be a really impactful year for some.
I have a feeling it's going to be a larger group than you think. So, is there a limit on how many people can be
Yeah,
in that?
I'm going to limit it to 20. And, because for me, the beauty is in the life on life. So I just, I think for it to be personal and to be able to customize the content as we kind of go through the year, and to really, I want to bring in, I'm so lucky here in Nashville to be surrounded by so many gifted and talented people that once I know kind of who's a part of our group, to be able to bring in some experts who live here in the Nashville area to speak directly to kind of their goals
Yeah.
and their dreams. So I really want to make it very personal. So that's why I'm kind of keeping it small. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So theplaceforgood.com is the best place to get more information about that.
Well, it just went to 19. It's not 20 because I'm going to sign up.
Okay.
So there's only 19 spots
more.
left. That's right. No, I'm excited. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for what you're doing. So, and I'll have all this in my blog post when I post it, because I always say this in case somebody's driving down the road and they're listening and they couldn't scribble it down. Give me all the links. Good Talk, right? The Good
Yep.
Talk.
The
Right?
Good Talk podcast, yeah. And again, you can just on iTunes or Spotify or whatever. And then for Dream Year, if you're more interested in information on that, it's theplaceforgood.com.
Placeforgood.com. Brother, I am so thankful for you, for your time, that you would come on with me today. I love the background, by the way. The house looks awesome.
Thank you.
I could talk to you for hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. I want to talk about the farm, but we can hear a lot about that on the Good Talk podcast, right?
Yep.
I'm thankful that even though I didn't get hired, I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter, Pete. I'm not. Even though I didn't get, like, literally there's something magical that happened with CrossPoint. I'm thankful you started CrossPoint. I'm thankful for your staff. They're all friends to me to this day, and they've been awesome for me. Just incredible people. And CrossPoint's forever going to hold a special place in my heart, as well as my family's heart, for seasons throughout life. And I meant what I said on social media. So, man, Merry Christmas to you guys.
Merry Christmas to you. And I just want to say thanks to you. Like, you're right. You and I have just gotten to know each other kind of over the years, kind of on the surface level. We haven't connected, in a while, but you even inviting me to be a part of this is amazing to me. And I think for anyone, and whether you live a public life or not, anybody who goes through any kind of public failure, I think that you have a new awareness, a new just gratitude for people who are willing to give you a second chance, people who don't allow your past to truly define you. And I know there's a lot of Christian cliches that we throw around like that, like your past doesn't define you. Well, maybe not to God, but the reality is in the Christian community, they'll remind you of your past real quick. Unfortunately, right.
Right.
And so for me, I think this is the only second podcast I've done in 5 years. And it's not like I'm looking to do a bunch of them, but for you to reach out and just say, hey, would you like to come on here and chat? It means a lot to me. And I appreciate your grace. I appreciate you not allowing my past to define me. I appreciate just in the way that you've treated me and talked to me today. I can tell that you feel like God's still working in me and through me. And I think for anybody to have hope, they really have to believe that their best days are ahead. And I believe that. And people like you, Aaron, are helping me believe that. And sometimes you need people in your life who can believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say thank you for your grace. Thank you for sharing your platform with me and just allowing me the opportunity to chat with you today.
Man, it's been truly an honor. And I was a little excited when you said yeah. So because again, man, we're all jacked up. I mean, I don't. At the end of the day, we are. And if we weren't before 2020, we're even more jacked up now, right? I mean, it's just that's where life is. And man, we all need to extend each other some grace and give each other a little patience. And I know it's like you said, that's cliche, and it's but it's true, man.
It is.
If we can't extend some grace, whether it's race, whether it's politics, whether it's our personal lives, man, we all need a lot of grace right now. And I think God's asking us to give each other some grace, and He's watching.
Right.
You know, what did you
That's
do
right.
with me? What did you do with the talents I gave you? The two questions He's going to ask us, and especially now more than ever before. So, man, you're my internet pastor forever. I don't care what you do the rest of your life. You can go into steelwork for all I care. Pete Wilson will always be my internet pastor, and you saw me through some seasons, and I'm thankful for you for those days, for now, for coming on. I wish you a very happy holidays, a very Merry Christmas, and thank you so much, Pete. I really
Thanks,
appreciate
Dave.
it.
Merry
All right,
Christmas
brother.
to you.
I love
Grateful.
you, man. Talk to you. Thanks.
Okay.